Hello, welcome back. This will be our third and final video of this mini-series discussing articles that are dealing with first person in academic writing, as well as carving our wood spirit, this guy. When we last left off with the carving, we had a nose, we had a mouth divot, and an eyebrow divot, and using a little Martha Stewart magic, for the interest of time, I've got a one wood spirit that I've been working on for off and on a couple weeks. That's a little further along, so you can see we've already got the nose divot there, the eye divots here. We've gotten our drop point here, like we talked about earlier. We've already kind of like beginning to scoop out, remove the wood. Where the nose comes in, divots down for the mouth, divots down again. So now we're kind of doing the work of, this is the hardest part that takes the longest, of scraping out the eye cavities, beginning to work on defining where the nose stops and the cheekbone begins. And this is where you really just have to feel it out. Word of advice, don't be greedy. When you're carving, it's very tempting to try to take the knife and make like big deep cuts, get a lot of wood out of the way if you got a lot of wood to move. So like with this guy, I had to move the whole top, taking it out and kind of forming into some kind of hat. But it takes a long time, right? You have to make very small, not greedy, meager little cuts. Pretend you're like shaving the wood, right? So I'm not trying to like hack into it and cut away big chunks. Really take very tiny shavings. So that's the way to move the wood. It adds up. Alright, we're going to be discussing Dr. Teresa Thonney today. And Dr. Teresa Thonney probably was my favorite article that I read in preparation for this series. She's a PhD in English. She teaches at Columbia Basin College. And her article is titled, "At First I Thought, But I Don't Know for Sure. Use of First-Person Pronouns in Academic Writing of Novices." So this is, really exactly what we've been talking about this whole time, what the whole website is based about, kind of based on that question. It's like in beginning authors, writers who are just now finding their voice and finding their voice in an academic setting. How is the first person used? How should it be used? And the question, moreover, this is kind of the preface to the whole project, is like, yes, use first person. Contain yourself, but you need to have your voice present in the paper, and first person is an excellent way to do that. Teresa Thonney is going to show us how to do it well. Her article will be linked below. This will be a short synopsis and kind of some talking points from it, but definitely check it out if you're interested in using the first person. You all should be. Teresa Thonney does an excellent job of describing the way students use the first person, and I'm going to begin scraping out these eye sockets while I talk to you. And the pitfalls they hit, and also the triumphs. She does a good job, I think, of balancing the good and the bad that comes with it. She says that the students, when they use first person, they often use it very well. And they use it like experts. That's her phrase, that students use the first person like experts. And when they're using it like experts, they're doing specific things that we'll talk about in just a second. But she says sometimes they're using it like students, which I guess means not experts. And then it's kind of like the bad side of first person, or the imperfect side of first person, which is a little more forgiving, I would say. So she says that first person, of course, like this website is espoused, and like can give a sense of authority to a piece. And that's how experts use it, right? They use it to make a piece more fun and relatable for readers. Or they use it to make a piece sound more human, or establish themselves as an authority and leverage their own ethos, especially if they have a personal experience like our last author. But she says sometimes students do that very well, but sometimes they can use this first-person authority to kind of give voice to their own latent insecurities with material, or insecurities as authors, as writers. If you're giving your voice of authority to a piece, and that authority is not expert because you're a student, which is understandable, but then it makes sense that that might hurt you more than help you. So we need to, Dr. Thonney says, always be aware of how we're using first person and to use it in specific ways that mirror those of the experts. And she has those all very clearly outlined in her article. I'm going to talk about just a few of them. She says, identities we take on, right? Because if we're using first person, we're assuming a narrative of our own, a voice of our own, and an identity of our own. And some of these identities she's given names to, like there's the guide or the architect. That's when a student will use first person to say, in this paper I'll be showing you, or in this paper we'll discuss, or kind of like guiding you through or showing you kind of the blueprint of how the paper is built. There's also the opinion holder. The opinion holder will be when a student will use first person to say something to the effect of, I believe this, or I think that. And that's also something she says that the experts do, and something that we should encourage our students to do. It's a little more rare than the guide or architect. That's the most common way that students use first person, Dr. Thonney said, and she had a pretty large sample group. I think she looked at over 400 student pieces, so quite a bit. And then the third way she says that students use the first person, and the most rare and the best way, is when they're using themselves as a source, right? When they're appealing to their own authority. And the way she describes this in the article is you just kind of have to fake it till you make it, right? So yes, do your research, but also there's going to be times when your own personal perspective that you are an expert on, because it's your life, is what's needed, and you should have authority about that when you speak. That's what the experts do, and that's what we should be emulating. So one of the best things you can do with first person is to make a claim, right? To make a claim in your thesis, and then you've got the rest of the paper to defend that claim. And I can tell you from personal experience, the saucier, the edgier your claim is, the more work you have to do to convince your readers that what you're saying isn't like total malarkey, the more fun you're going to have writing the paper. It's going to be all the better. So use first person to make claims. That's what Dr. Thonney says. That's what students need to do. It's also statistically what she says they do the least. Yes. She noted, interestingly, in a case study with 2 chemistry students, that the students were told to write a narrative of a personal experience they had. And these are hard science students, let's remember chemistry. And they were told not to use the first person, told explicitly to use third person, to explain the experience they personally had in a lab setting. And they both use first person. So students, Dr. Thonney says, want to use first person. They will use first person. They will sometimes use it effectively to give a personal experience. But she found in the same study that when students were writing papers based on textual reference, like an English paper or something like that, they were less likely to use first person, which is, interesting because, and I guess predictable, because it's not their own personal experience, and you're called to interpret when you're working with textual reference. But remember that as the interpreter, you're also the authority of your own interpretation. So use that interpretation with authority to make a claim. Whether you're writing a paper based on textual reference or your own personal experience, the first person can add strength and authority and conviction to your paper, and conviction is the root of dedicated and steadfast research that is compelling and fun to read and write, I would say. Well, guys, we still have a long way to go on our wood spirit, but you can definitely see the face beginning to take shape. Your next step will be to get the hardwood out, right? Keep on scraping, don't be greedy, little cuts. Then I like to come back with a hand sand and kind of smooth it out, and that'll give us a next step. And eventually, and please do follow up on YouTube if you're interested in this project. It's quite easy. You'll have something that looks like this, and you can put it in your house. And people will say, hey, did you make that? And you'll say, yes, I did. And I also will use the first person to tell you about it. Thank you for listening.